Mmm, you made a cracking cup of tea, Cat. Pairs quite nicely with the Wensleydale. Why, I've just had a wonderful idea for a new invention, Cat. It's a podcast that discusses movies and media, but from a different perspective, a deeper perspective. A mindful perspective. Yes, that's it, Cat. Now, what to call it? How about candy cosmology? No? Maybe snacks and philosophy? Wait! Popcorn? Theology, that's it! Why, Cat, I'm a certified genius!
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 343 of Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I am James.
And I'm Kat.
And we're looking at Wallace and Gromit, the acclaimed British stop-motion animation comedy franchise. Tell us about it.
Well, it's created by Nick Park, produced by Aardman Animations. Specifically, though, today we're looking at the original 3 shorts, which are A Grand Day Out, The Wrong Trousers, and A Close Shave, which were compiled into one release called Wallace and Gromit, 3 Amazing Adventures.
And remember, if you like what you hear, ring the bell, subscribe, like, make sure to follow us on YouTube, and also share us with all of your other Wallace and Gromit fans. Now, in case you've only seen other Aardman entries like Chicken Run, some people may be more familiar with that because it was obviously a big feature motion picture. But the other Aardman entries like them, this series particularly centers on Wallace, who is a good-natured, eccentric, cheese-loving inventor, and Gromit, his loyal and intelligent anthropomorphic beagle. And we have some representation here if you're watching us here live. So I think, would you say he's a little like a British Snoopy?
And that seems reasonable to say. Although he might be a little smarter than Snoopy.
Ooh, might have some Charles Schultz fans that might take you to task for that. But they both at some point fly airplanes. Well, I guess Snoopy flies his doghouse.
True. That is also true, yeah. And he is a beagle. So there's definitely there was a little Snoopy homage, I think, in that sequence for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss before we get into things here. It's very, very British. So like some people probably love that, and others, I don't know, maybe not so much. Obviously, our British correspondents like Rory and others probably have something to say about it. I think we might actually have some thoughts from him later on in the episode.
And the Anglophile correspondents.
Yeah. So as far as cartoons go, it's a little more low key, right? I mean, it doesn't have a lot of flash coming at you like some crazy American kid cartoons, Dexter's Laboratory or Powerpuff Girls. It's smooth. It's a little, you drink a cup of tea when you watch it.
Yes, you do. Yeah, it's a little more fanciful, I think. It's very much about imagination and creativity, but it's also done in that old stop motion style. But the plasticine characters so well realized that it's so engaging. It's clever, it's funny, and it's very, very engaging. I think for adults and children, honestly.
Yeah. Well, before we get into spoilers, let's give this Wallace and Gromit, these 3 episodes, obviously, in some ways, the whole franchise. There's really not a lot, really, much more. There's a few episodes.
Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
Yep, there's a feature-length film.
And there's the Shaun the Sheep kind of spin-off series. It doesn't really feature Wallace and Gromit, but it definitely features Shaun the Sheep and characters within that same universe, if you will.
Yeah. But it's not hard for anybody who hasn't watched it. Like to watch the complete package, it's not a lot of viewing hours. It's actually pretty slight.
Yes.
So these are the first 3 I know we encountered. So from a popcorn perspective, purely, would we say Wallace and Gromit for you is stale, fresh, or buttered and salted, bad, good, or great, and maybe a 1 or 2 minute reason why? Great.
It's buttered and salted. It's so clever. It's so sweet. It's funny. They're kind of like comfort food. They're my scones and tea, if you will. They're just the way that they get across. The way that they tell their story, I guess, is what's intriguing to me, because so much of it, honestly, is told non-verbally. And I always find that fascinating. Gromit is so expressive, and to have that be done in stop motion animation is always intriguing to me. The amount of work and effort that goes into making a character that you literally have to move their eyebrows, move their eyes, inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter, to get them to do that. And then to have it be so seamless and so expressive, and then so clever in the story that they're telling, so whimsical. I think maybe that's the best word for it. It's whimsy. And I find that very, very engaging and very comforting. And they're just a lot of fun to watch. So for me, I return to them again and again, and you've experienced that as well. Anytime I find Wallace and Gromit merchandise, I get pretty excited about it, as you can see from the things you have in your studio, as well as my clock, my stuffed Gromit. They've been a part of my life since I encountered them, and I'm always happy to find more things or introduce people to it.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's fair to say you're the bigger fan.
That's true.
I mean, I give it a fresh. I don't know if I would go all the way to, like, I enjoy them. And I think by the time we get to Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I was fully on board with the feature length film. And you kind of get to know them. The first episode, we'll talk about it. I mean, it's pretty slight. It's very, you could argue it's like, what really happens? What do we know about them? So True. And so that's pretty solid, buttered and salted, and at least fresh. There's some butter and salt on there. I can't say there isn't. So, but we all know a film. But to differentiate, you're definitely the bigger fan. So I got to say, I'm a notch down just from a fan perspective. So, so what about the theological quality? You can love it for all sorts of different things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's deep. So if we're going to drink from the movie's depths of themes and talk about that, how would you place it in your mind? Diluted, carbonated, or the cup is running over?
I would say carbonated, maybe a little diluted. They are pretty short. They're very slight and obviously extremely whimsical. If there is some kind of point to the stories, you have to dig and stretch a little. Even I'll acknowledge that. But I think there are themes that can be found in it, but I do think they're fairly simple. I think the intention was a short, whimsical tale about inventors. I mean, honestly, you can't dig into them too much to really push that it's remotely real. Obviously, you've anthropomorphized animals. You have trips to the moon in a rocket ship that you built in your backyard. Like, there's a sentient oven. So, but I think you still can pull some themes of friendship, of just an excitement of ingenuity,
Don't get spoilery.
Of creativity. But I think too that and I would say there's some other themes you can kind of dig into about how you view the world, both good and bad. So there's still some such to talk about.
Yeah, I'd say diluted, but not necessarily in a bad way, which might sound weird, but it's just not the reality. Right, the reality is there are simple themes, and I think we'll talk about it. There's at least one simple theme in each story that we can pick out and talk about. And parents could use that to talk to their kids when they watch them. Yeah. But it wouldn't be the go-to. Like if it's like, well,
no,
mom, dad, if you want to sit and have some family films and have some good conversations, it's like, this would be harder for mom and dad to figure out or broker those conversations, I think.
Yeah. So, I would go so far as to say, like Wallace, they're not that deep.
Yeah.
And so this is a bit of an exercise when it comes to kind of a popcorn theology thing, but I think it both proves the point and shows that you can still exercise the idea of watching something mindfully, even something extremely whimsical. You can still watch it mindfully, even as you recognize this is very whimsical. The intent is not to teach any particular point, except maybe, don't be a thief. That would probably be a good point that comes up. So that one's pretty strong, but in general, they are whimsical, fun, and engaging on that level.
Well, you love Wallace and Gromit, but it wasn't our choice to do this episode, right? So you actually have some people to thank.
I do have many people to thank because I am always happy to watch Wallace and Gromit. So yes, the patron saints who chose this for us made this possible and got me all excited to pull out my Wallace and Gromit gear, get my Wensleydale and cheese.
That's legit Wensleydale.
It is indeed Wensleydale cheese, which I was aware of before this.
People might not know that the show saved Wensleydale, right?
That's actually a weird fact, yes. The Wensleydale factory was in the process of going out of business, and Wallace and Gromit was so popular, and the idea of Wensleydale cheese then became so popular that they saved Wensleydale cheese, and it's actually now a fairly often staple, at least around the holidays, at the Harlan House.
Yay, good job, guys. Well, it looks like we're pretty close. I mean, we know that they aren't super deep, but we also know that they're fresh to buttered and salted. So we don't have a lot of differential. So we should probably drop some ads so we can get into the spoilery stuff and go ahead and dive deeper in Wallace and Gromit. So stay tuned and we will be right back.
Popcorn Theology has been mindfully viewing cinema from a godly perspective since 2015. But why? Where did it come from? Well, one of the inspirations was our host James Harleman's book, Cinemagogue, published in 2012, exploring the intersections between film and faith. And now, fresh off the press, is an updated edition of the book, the Cinemagogue Director's Cut. This version contains over 40 pages of new content with reviews and recommendations, movie references, illustrations, further shaping the story-formed argument for God's existence while also delving deeper on hot topics like how we deal with sex and nudity in film. It's the how-to guide for all things popcorn theology. And this time, it's not just available on Kindle and in paperback, but also a hardcover edition for all you true book lovers. So if you like movies, if you're a cinephile, if you spend hours talking film, this book is definitely for you. Or if you're a casual consumer who thinks movie making exists merely for diversion, this book may just change your life. Cinemagogue available now at Amazon.com. For bulk orders or signed copies, check out Cinemagogue.com for details.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com. And we're back. Dropping the spoiler warning, everybody, as we dig deeper into Wallace and Gromit, the three amazing adventures, their first three amazing adventures. All of them are amazing. But also remember to keep up with us and share this episode on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Partridge in a Pear Tree, and of course on YouTube. And leave some comments. That's also something that helps spread the love, lets people know, draws people to the page. Leave your comments. What do you think of the episode? What do you think of Wallace and Gromit or whatever movie or show we're reviewing? Maybe you can point out some things we missed. If we say it's slight or maybe not that deep, maybe you think differently. Maybe you have some thoughts to share on the theological depths of Wallace and Gromit. And there's lots of other ways people can help out, right?
Yeah, another way you can support the podcast is just to rate and review it on iTunes or wherever you listen. Or you can support us financially through Patreon.
Yep, you mentioned that earlier, but I'll mention it again. Just donating a few dollars per month will make you a patron saint of Popcorn Theology. We have 2 tiers that give our saints special access to, let's see, there's an exclusive Facebook and Discord group. There's exclusive content now that we're releasing just for our members that people don't get to see here unless you are a member. Some of our in the lobby special episodes and special interviews. And then we also let you vote, of course, on future episodes, which is why we're doing this one. Not that we would have ever had to twist Catherine's arm to do that. So let's go ahead and enjoy some popcorn and talk about our popcorn thoughts. So not going to get into the deep theological stuff, if there is any. But let's just talk the fun stuff first. In general, we talked a little bit about why, but now you can dig a little bit deeper and even say things that you thought were fun or spoilery from episodes. There's a ton of Wallace and Gromit. You could probably watch it all in a week if you hunkered down.
Easy. I'd watch it in a day.
Yeah. But Catherine, why other things that you love about, and maybe these episodes in particular, maybe things you noticed that you didn't notice before, or watching some of the extra stuff?
Well, again, like I said, I think they're so sweet. They're so adorable, and they're honestly really, really clever. There's puns and funny things in the background. I noticed when Wallace goes down into the basement to build his rocket ship, there's a leaning up against the wall is a sled, and it says Rosebud. There's all the different books that Gromit reads. He reads something by Dostoevsky. He's reading Electronics for Dogs. He's just those sorts of things. And then there's puns and stuff in the background on the posters, in the newspapers. Yeah. It's really, really rich, the background of things. And I've heard this said before, and I do kind of admit it. There's something kind of neat about the stop motion where, again, I said they were so expressive, but there's this, you can actually see the fingerprints in the plasticine as they're making the faces. And there's something that feels kind of intimate and weirdly almost real about that. And I really like the character designs, and the stories are just, they're cute and clever, and they communicate so much silently. And I always find that to be really intriguing and engaging when someone does it well. It's kind of like people mock mimes, but if you find a really good mime, you're kind of stunned at what they're able to do physically and how much they can communicate non-verbally.
Which is Gromit, really.
Which is Gromit entirely. They actually intended to have him speak and then realized that they didn't really need to. And oddly enough, for another, just kind of a weird side note, Martin Freeman, who's a wonderful British actor, has actually often talked about that. They'll have a lot of dialogue for him, and he'll often say, like, I can do that without having to say it. I can get it across with just my face. And I actually really appreciate that type of acting, and that's what they're doing. What the creators are doing with this is they're having the characters act. They're just doing it through these little models. And Gromit's facial expressions, you know exactly what he's thinking. And even the penguin, they do little things where he like runs his hand through his fake chicken head. And
wait, you're not talking about the penguin. You're talking about Feathers McGraw, right?
Feathers McGraw. I'm sorry. Have you seen this chicken? They communicate so much nonverbally, and it's fascinating. The little penguin has these little beady eyes, and you can tell when he's giving Gromit the hard stare. And it's so rewatchable because of the amount of care and craft that goes into it. So that's honestly why I've loved them from the beginning. And they're Oscar nominated, Oscar winners. Primarily, I think because of that, the storytelling is actually quite complex. For as slight as we might say that they are, the storytelling is actually quite complex because they do a lot of it non-verbally. And so anything that does that, I will lift and laud, as I really appreciate that type of craft.
I think that's something I'd say understated or quaint. Quaint is a word that comes when I think about these episodes. Because I think about American cartoons, like Wallace or like Gromit would be like, like everything would be, like the jaw dropping kind of craziness.
Or some of the anime that we've watched, they do a lot of that too. That exaggerated expressions and
lots of flailing arms and stuff. And here, like the most, just like the most you get is like a little wriggle, right? You don't get a lot of.
Well, you get a lot of eyebrow. You get eye rolls. You get heavy sigh, like.
And on the one hand, I think that's distinctly British, but I also think it's distinctly more. I would hope that parents would introduce their kids to this before they just let them get into some of the craziness of SpongeBob SquarePants and just other things. It's just being extreme to sort of make noise and be in your face. Whereas these actually are more subtle. There's a lot more subtle communication at play, and I think if kids get that extreme burned into their brain, it's like I don't even know if they could enjoy these. They'd be bored.
You also have to watch them and pay attention to catch all of the jokes and all of the things that are going on. You have to watch them. You can't be on your phone and think that you're going to get all of the depth that's going on. So I do appreciate that as well. You actually do have to pay attention to catch all of the references and the jokes and the different things that are going on.
All right. So let's do something else a little more challenging maybe for you. So there's 3 episodes here. We've got Grand Day Out. We've got The Wrong Trousers.
Yep.
And we have A Close Shave. So of the 3, which is your favorite episode? Which was the standout?
I might go with Wrong Trousers.
Okay.
Because I do think
because of the penguin.
Weirdly enough, I do actually like him as a villain. Like he does some really subtle stuff, some really kind of like, oh, that's evil stuff. But I do really, really love all of the morning automation stuff that comes from A Close Shave. There's almost a Back to the Future Doc vibe in some of the Close Shave automation stuff. And then when it starts to go haywire and it just... the porridge machine is just pounding him and he's trying to catch it. And I find that really, really funny.
Or when the sheep are getting washed, where he's like, getting squished.
But I do appreciate I love heist movies, so I kind of have to go with Wrong Trousers, even though Feathers is evil. And I'm glad that he is caught at the end.
Yeah.
How about you? Which one would you say?
Well, see, I'll go. I kind of feel like they got better with age, so I would lean into Close Shave for sure. Like partially because what you taught, like that's a great opening. Yeah, it's the Back to the Future opening, and only instead of feeding the dog, it's actually Wallace who has the dog do everything for him.
Yes,
and so there's all of that, and then just the chase scene at the end. And the robot dog, turns out it's a robot. He's the Terminator.
That's true.
Terminator
I can see how you would definitely go for that one.
As they put him, and then he breaks out and just starts coming after him and stuff. and pretty grim, because then he bites it in a pretty
Yeah.
extreme way. I was like, although I guess they repair him, and he becomes a nice dog at the end. But for a little kid too, just like that, even when it's the villain just get chews up in the those gears, he gets sort of chewed up. It's kind of extreme.
Yeah. And some of the great expressions, little things that are going on in the background in A Close Shave, when Preston goes out and like pulls Gromit down on the bungee and and then when he's just hanging there and his ears are down, but he's like it's such a great expression, and it's all happening silently in the background.
Yeah.
So you're not wrong. A Close Shave is fabulous.
So, well, that's probably a good transition. Any other standout moments from all the three? Is there? I do love the robot. I love the robot in A Grand Day Out, just because it's such a strange little idea. It's just like this coin-operated toaster oven.
He is
on the moon.
And again, he's so expressive with, again, he has no dialogue. He has no way to speak, but his little
he has no face.
He has no face, but you get so much expression from him. And then at the end, when he gets his little ski holiday, it's so sweet. And he like waves goodbye, but he's like, yeah, he's skiing. It's so sweet. So I really do love the little oven at the end of A Grand Day Out. Honestly, I love that the moon's actually made of cheese, and that's like a wish come true for you too. Know.
So, well, it's sort of probably a good transition point. If we're talking about the skis and the moon, we're getting into territory I think is going to probably bubble up as some of our ideas as in the more theological mode. So let's pour that theological soda and transition ourselves to, and we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to do things different because obviously, normally we do, so each host would take a theme and then we do a lightning round of extra themes, but we've got 3 very separate story episodes. So instead of hitting 2 or 3 points, let's just go ahead and take each episode by episode and see what main theme maybe stood out for one or both of us. So I guess we have to start where, first things first, we started with A Grand Day Out, which was the first one. Didn't it take him something like 9 years to make it?
It took him a very long time. It was actually a school project that he was working on. And then he was hired by Aardman Animation, and they allowed him to continue working on it and finish it. And if I remember correctly, Grand Day Out was nominated for an Oscar, but lost to Creature Comforts, which is another Aardman Animation thing that I adore. Where they took interviews with people and used those interviews to be zoo animals. And it's also quite clever. So if you enjoy Wallace and Gromit, I would highly recommend Creature Comforts as well.
Yeah. Well, just so we're all on the same page, give us a synopsis for Grand Day Out.
Sure, yeah. So a bank holiday is coming, and the inventor Wallace and his dog Gromit are looking for something to do, somewhere to go. And their plans are interrupted when they discover that they're out of cheese. There's not a drop in the house. So to replenish their depleted supply, they decide to build a rocket ship and travel to the natural source of cheese, which is the moon. Everyone knows the moon is made of cheese, where they encounter a coin-operated robot and get into a spot of trouble. Again, It sounds very surreal, but it actually works. So in that one, was there a particular theme that stood out to you?
Well, mine's a little odd, I think, when it comes to this episode, because this episode is so weird.
It is.
But the whole thing with wooden rocket ships, where you even put up wallpaper, and so just you made it in your basement, the cheesy moon. I think you could. I think some people might liken it to a Seinfeld episode and just try to say it's a show about nothing. But even though they do go in search of cheese, so it's like they want something, I think the focus that a young viewer could come away with, or a discerning parent, would be actually kind of a theme of contentment and being content. And I don't know if you got anything about contentment out of that as you were watching Grand Day Out. Does that strike a chord?
I can see that, especially with the robot that ends up, he's on the moon. And like Wallace at the beginning, he finds the travel magazine and he's looking for something to do, and he has this dream of the ski holiday. And so he wants...
Wait, the robot does?
the robot
Yeah.
has this dream of a ski holiday, and so he wants to go to Earth with them, and he tries to go to Earth with them, and he's denied, which is almost a little sad, actually, when you think about it. Like, he kind of chases them, and they misunderstand why he's chasing them. But then he gets left with these metal pieces that he's able to turn into his own skis. And then you see him, and again, weirdly enough, a little oven, you can tell that he's so happy. He's so happy to be skiing. And there was actually, we listened to the commentary, and someone showed it to their son, and there was a kid who thought this was really sad, because he's like, but he's there all alone, and it's so sad that he's alone. But the father had to explain, no, he is happy, though. He's content. He'd still got to do what he wanted to do. He was able to ski. So in a weird way, Wallace and Gromit actually facilitate him getting that dream. He didn't get specifically what he wanted, but he has enough, and he's very happy, and he seems really grateful, because he actually waves goodbye to them at the end, like, thank you, I got my skis. And it's just so cute. And weirdly, it kind of reminds me of Philippians 4:11-13, where it says, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. And in any circumstance, I've learned the secret to facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So yes, so watching Wallace and Gromit, watching a little oven get his skis and get to go skiing, and I think about that contentment. So
yeah, he didn't get it how he thought he needed it, but he's able to kind of fashion his own little things and kind of have it his own.
Yeah,
he can have it where he's at and in his own way. And I love, you've mentioned Philippians 4:13, that last verse. Like, a lot of people miss the point of that, right? Because I've heard people misapply it. Well, I mean, it's not like it's totally misapplied, but sometimes if you isolate that verse and you just think, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I can do anything. It's like, well, no, the reference is, I can do all things, meaning be content even when I don't have everything that I might want. I can take the means that I have and find a way to be content. Like he takes some scrap metal that's come off a homemade rocket ship and makes for himself. He's creative, which I think is a point of Wallace and Gromit. He's creative with what he has, and then he's having a wonderful time. And that's kind of where I thought that even kind of rolls back to what we see with Wallace and Gromit, because I think if you talk about it from the reality of, okay, a kid's going to watch this and how are they going to get inspired? Like, obviously, they're not literally going to the moon any more than Wallace and Gromit could literally. I mean, I guess technically they do, but I think what's really happening in this story from a kid's perspective is it's about creativity. It's like it's like a kid who will go out to their basement or their backyard and make a rocket ship out of cardboard and some plastic pieces or some scrap metal that Dad has, and then you don't literally go to the moon, but you imagine you're going to the moon.
It kind of reminds me of the Calvin and Hobbes comics as well, where he would build the transmogrifier, and you would see that it was a cardboard box, but you would see in his imagination he becomes this other creature, and he's running around the backyard. And I agree with that very much. The creativity that's involved, the ingenuity and using those things that you have.
Yeah, I mean, it goes down to his basement. Like, there's no way that could really fly. There's no way that they could. And the moon is not made of cheese. But with your imagination as a kid, you could build a rocket ship in your backyard or basement, and then you could build it out of a broomstick. So the fire's out the other end, and put a little rocket and wings on it. And you could zoom down to the store where there might be some coin operated machines, and you pretend that's a robot. You'd probably get some cheese. Hopefully, you wouldn't nick it. You'd pay for it, But you'd have an adventure like you were going to the moon, and you'd be walking around like you're on the moon and pretend you're in a spacesuit like that. That's kind of what I think is really happening from the from the viewer's perspective. And so even that beginning, because Wallace is looking at all, it's like Cheese World, and there's all the cheeses that the magazine's telling him that he should have, and there's all these vacations telling him where, like, the world is trying to tell him where to go, and those are almost like Covet magazines. right?
Sure.
He's like, I want to go there. Oh, I need this stuff. Like that's what magazines are. And instead, he goes down in his basement and is creative with what he has, and has an
True.
adventure with what he has. And
Hmm.
apparently, what he has actually can take. But
Well, you could also make the argument that really all he wanted was some cheese. Like he wasn't even really after some.
yeah,
He wasn't even specifically after the adventure of going to the moon.
right.
He wanted to go somewhere where there was cheese. So
Yeah.
he was even almost after it. He took the most circuitous route to get to that simple thing. But the idea is there that really all he wanted was a day out with his friend with crackers and cheese, and tea. But
Well, see, now that reminds me. That's First Timothy 6. Obviously, it would add godliness to that contentment, but it says, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can't take anything out of the world. But if we have food, cheese, if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. Those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. That's like instead of needing all the things that the magazines and the world tells us, like he has his basement, he has his dog, he has some cheese, and he's content. And they have a cracking day, and that's
do.
And it's very simple, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
you don't have. He's not Scrooge McDuck. He doesn't have $1 million. He doesn't have a money pit. He doesn't have it. You've got this and they seem to have a fairly simple home,
Mm-hmm.
except for all the inventions between the walls. That's
Well, sure. And one could argue moving into the next one, there is an issue of money leads him to make some naive choices. So there's also the element I think you need to walk that line of imagination and creativity where you can be imaginative and creative, but you still have to have one foot based in reality of acknowledging certain things where
having some discernment, maybe
discernment, a little discernment is helpful. So
that brings us to Feathers McGraw, I guess, right?
Indeed. So the next short, which came out a few years later, was called "The Wrong Trousers," and the recap of that is that Gromit finds himself actually being pushed out of his room and home by the new lodger because they found themselves short on funds and they decided to take in a lodger. And that lodger actually turns out to be a ruthless criminal, Feathers McGraw, who's actually a penguin. And the penguin is planning a robbery and needs to use Wallace and his mechanical remote-controlled trousers to pull off the raid. However, Gromit gets wise to the penguin and comes to the rescue. And you then start to see, I think in The Wrong Trousers, you definitely start to see the theme of Gromit coming to the rescue.
Yeah.
Of definitely Gromit being a bit smarter than Wallace in some respects, a little more discerning, a little more cautious. You see a little bit of that in A Grand Day Out, but you definitely see it in The Wrong Trousers and then in A Close Shave as well.
Yeah, I was trying to find it. It was actually
it reminded me of that idea of you need to be willing to be trusting, but at the same time, you need to exercise some discernment in the character of the friends that you keep and who you rent your rooms to. So background checks are a good thing. But at the same time, there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And I do think that we see that in Gromit. He is actually treated almost shamefully. Wallace doesn't stand up for him at all. Allows Feathers to just move into his room, allows Feathers to start taking over some of the friendship things that Gromit had done. Doesn't even seem to notice it. He seems very oblivious to what's happening. And Gromit ends up outside in a doghouse. And yet when Wallace ends up in trouble, Gromit comes to save the day. And there's that play on the loyalty of a dog, etc. But he is truly that friend that forgives and helps you when you're in a really, really tough spot. When your trousers have gone crazy. I don't know. What did you think about this one?
Well, it's Proverbs 18:24, right? The verse you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin. actually the first part of that. So
oh, most definitely.
and and Wallace almost does. Like there's that moment where he's being walked around in his sleep and stealing the diamond, and the penguin is so transparent. Like
he's so transparent,
buttering him up and like bringing him his slippers or doing,
it's
like
so transparent.
Yeah, so he puts some faith in an unreliable friend, but then of course who's he crying out to? Like he doesn't even know Gromit's around, but when he's like the trousers are out of control, and he's just calling out Gromit, Gromit. It's just
one could argue what is it? There's that joke. There will always be prayer in schools as long as there's tests.
Yeah.
The idea that even people who don't claim to want to know or honor God, when they get into a scrape, will start calling out for him.
Oh,
right?
Now see now see you just touched on. See, like Wallace is the sort of the parallel for God's relationship with us in some ways in this episode. Right? It says, because what you were saying, like there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Certainly that applies to man's best friend.
Indeed.
Which would be the dog. But he's almost Christ-like, right? I mean, he is shunned. He in fact, even if you go to the beginning, I think sadly, if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we treat our relationship with God like Wallace. We kind of want it on autopilot. We don't want a real relationship.
The birthday present that he gives him was almost heartbreaking.
Like I've got legs that will walk you for you,
so I don't have to.
So I don't. Yeah, and that's just like when our prayer life goes dry, when our all the different ways we just kind of want relationship with God to be on autopilot until we have a problem, until now I need something. Oh, it's morning Gromit, and he's pushing the button. I need my thing. Beep beep beep.
Yeah,
that's the next episode. Yeah,
Gromit.
or when your trousers have taken you where you probably ought not to have gone. There's probably some parallels there we don't want to talk about.
Blame it on the trousers. I think there's some other proverb verses about that, going places you shouldn't go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like that and also it's also funny that Gromit is silent. So he's like that silent friend and partner that's just there for you. And so in a lot of ways like that, we should be crying out to God more. We should be relying on him more. We should be trusting in him as our primary relationship and not an unreliable friends. And
not throwing him over for the new friend that comes in and seemingly is going to solve all your problems, because they're either, they're paying rent, or they're doing this, or they start doing the things that the other friend used to do, and you allow them then to take that place of prominence in your life when you shouldn't. And you start to then think poorly of the other friend, or you simply don't stick up for him. And yet Gromit is a wonderful character, because he absolutely, after that humiliation, after that neglect, he still comes to his friend's aid.
Yeah.
Like he recognizes that his friend Wallace is now keeping bad company. And while he takes the shame for a little bit, when his friend comes to realize it, Gromit steps in and rescues him and saves him. And I do appreciate that.
And also, from more of a godlike parallel, he demonstrates some pretty miraculous powers, like being able to build a train as the train is rolling on it.
Manifests train track. It's the never-ending. It's the fishes and loaves, but in Wallace and Gromit, it's train track that never runs out.
Yeah. So he does become, from that cartoon perspective, almost the magical friend, or the friend that can almost do anything and achieve anything to save you, and it's all the superpowers. So it almost reaches that state of otherworldly. It's a cartoon, so I think all of them do in that sense. But you have this metaphor for really, I think, in a good way, whether it's a dog, a human, or truly a divine relationship. It's that friendship that we should want to have and take for granted or not grateful for.
Yep.
And I've heard plenty of pastors in my time say sometimes we treat God like DOG, and so I think that this is a very good lesson about how
it is.
Yeah.
And Wallace just accepts Feathers into the house. There's no real background check. There's no anything. And then he doesn't stick up for his friend Gromit. and he doesn't seem very discerning. He seems extremely naive in just what he or blissfully oblivious.
Yeah.
And so I think you can tell Gromit knows something's up, right? Gromit starts to put 2 and 2 together. Like, wait a minute, have you seen this chicken? It kind of looks like Gromit's starting to put those pieces together and recognizing that this isn't someone that we should be hanging out with, or facilitating. And so you do start to see that Gromit is more discerning than Wallace. And so it starts to build that piece of the relationship. So there is some fun stuff that you can talk about with this, in, again, discernment, who you keep company with, how you treat your friends, who you allow to be your friends, because bad company corrupts. I mean, if Wallace hadn't come to help him, or I'm sorry, if Gromit hadn't come to help him, Wallace very easily could have been arrested for the theft of that jewel, which was something that he definitely didn't do.
Well, he kind of did. I mean,
he did it, but he certainly didn't do it consciously. But again, bad company.
Well, something I think you see in both these episodes, and then again in the third one, is another incredible trait that God has with us, that Gromit has with Wallace, is there's a lot of forbearance.
Oh, lot of much
patience. And he realized, he sees, at the outset, he sees some of the folly and some of the lack, and he just sort of bears with it in this very, I mean, not careless way. He's just, there's sort of that sigh, but he still sticks with his friend. It's like, okay,
he does.
We're probably going to go down a bad road here, but I'm going to be with you. There's going to be 2 sets of footprints, one of them a doggy footprints, and then sometimes there's only doggy footprints because he carried them. Sometimes there's just train tracks. So
because I manifested them miraculously.
Yeah. So I could build a track as fast as the train goes. Yeah, that almost one-ups Superman, really. Superman he can lay on the tracks and help it go across the bridge.
True.
Gromit can just build track as it goes.
Build track as it comes.
But Gromit seems to discern something even then in the third one, if we want to move on to our last episode.
Yes, again, that theme of Gromit being much more discerning, potentially a little smarter than his friend, but obviously great affection for his friend, and a stick with him sort of thing that occurs.
Well, it's not until the third episode where we really find out what they do kind of for a living, or what they do to make money, right?
I think maybe they started that business after the whole lodging thing went so poorly. That
could be true. But in a close shave, we find out that they are now going out and washing windows and have a whole setup and apparatus.
Windows are their speciality.
That's right. And Wallace falls in love with a wool store owner, a yarn store, a gal named Wendelin. But meanwhile, Gromit is framed for killing sheep and put in jail. But with help from one of the sheep named Sean and the sheep flock and Wendelin, Wallace has to figure out a way to get him out of prison, and then try to figure out how to get Wendelin out of her predicament.
Yes.
So now I thought this was the most obvious in terms of themes. This is where, if the first one was a little obscure, okay, what would we pull out of this? This one to me felt most obvious. Was it?
Sure.
Right? You see it, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see it. You kind of get the idea that, you have a little bit again of that sort of weird, neglectful relationship and the forbearance of Gromit. But it's for a slightly different reason this time, because Wallace is smitten. He becomes smitten with Wendelin, which then one could argue, again, discernment. Wallace, you must exercise discernment, because she is stuck in a predicament that is not entirely of her own making. I mean, if you wanted to go really, really pulling some stuff out of this. You could argue there's a legacy that has now ensnared her, and has actually.
I don't think that's pulling. I think that's obvious, right?
Well, I mean, some people will be like, wow, you guys are really Wallace and Gromit. You're talking about the legacy of sin left by her father because he left her this robot dog. Like,
oh, come on. Wait. No. Wait, she's enslaved by an evil master. And in fact, here you've literally got the flip of Wallace and Gromit, right? The dog owns the human. So you've got this, it says she's trapped under an evil master. So Preston is the evil master, and he's basically like Satan, and she's bound to him and complicit in the sin.
Yes,
like she's
in
participating
in the sheep wrestling, and and she does try to stand up at the end. So kudos to her for finally saying, "I will do this no more."
She repents. That's what
she
I'm talking
does
about.
repent. She does repent. But I think
you nailed it. Wait.
Sorry.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Preston the dog has perverted he's corrupted the father's legacy.
Yes.
Like, come on. That's a great metaphor. He's the fallen dog. He has fallen from fallen from grace. And then he's got Wendell roped into it. So like Eve, she is now sort of, she's bit on the same apple, even though and she's now chafing at it. She hates her sin, but she also is trapped in it. Like that's exactly what is going on. She's under a curse.
It is, and it's a perversion of the idea that he's supposed to be protecting her. And right now there's a wool shortage, and so she has a wool shop, so he has turned to thievery to continue providing for her.
And then so adding the dog food,
and then now adding in
and
the murder.
So
he definitely. Well, one could argue then he perverted his original programming, and then took it that much farther, right? Like he then became so ensnared in his own sin, and the programming becomes that much more corrupt. So it feeds itself and snowballs from sheep wrestling and thievery into murder. At
least killing animals, and then she's gonna kill Wallace and Wendell.
To cover his tracks. And so then the weird and kind of fun thing with this one is then you actually see Wallace, Gromit, and Sean intercede in a variety of roles. Wallace and Sean Gromit actually intercedes and gets Sean out of the potential death situation he was in at the very beginning. And they take him into their home. And then when Gromit gets framed for the murder and all of the sheep wrestling, Sean and Wallace then intercede and break him out of prison. And then in doing all of that, they're actually able to uncover what's happening with Preston and his true nature. And then by doing so, they're actually able to free Wendell from this situation that she's ensnared in.
Wait, so she's freed by a trio of helpers?
It's a trinity, if you will.
A triune effort of Wallace, Sean, and Gromit.
Yes.
No, that's totally what it is. Like, here the three of them get to play the role of intercessor in this. Really, it is a little bit of the slavery to sin story, and they get to play intercessor, right? That Romans 8:34 says Jesus intercedes for us. 1 John says he's our advocate with the Father. Hebrews 7 says that Jesus always lives to intercede. Like this is the intercessing. This is the intercessor. This is the Savior who intercedes. This is the Savior who comes in to rescue, and they get to play those roles. Which obviously there's only one Christ, but I mean even in real life, like you think about real life, like humans do play that role of intercessor. We have our church and some friends and others have supported there's real escape from the sex trade.
Mm-hmm.
Like, women are trapped in sin, and they're humans who advocate and intercede and try to play that Christ-like role to break them out. So this is a kid's way of getting it at how part of our mission in life is is to play those sub roles like Christ did for us. In small ways, we can pull out people out of enslavement or entrapment into these situations. So it is the deepest of the stories, I think, in a lot of ways, because you can apply it to a lot of things, ways that we can intercede as humans to pull people out of places they're trapped in. And then, of course, the big story where Jesus is interceded for us and pulled us out of the slave. He's definitely sacked Preston, or he's sacked Satan, and Satan will not be redeemed and turned into a cute little dog, but that's at the end, sadly. But that's not the way the story plays out, guys.
But that is not.
But it totally works. Like, in come our heroes and set this person free. Like, our role isn't identifying with Gromit or Sean or even Wallace in the story, but it's like we're the Wendelins. We're trapped. Yeah.
Well, and there's even that idea again, the discernment, because you do see how Gromit gets framed is because he's starting to recognize and figure out something's up with Preston, and he's trying to actually suss out the mystery of what's actually going on.
I love when he sticks his head through gets the picture taken, and he's
like, what? And there's even then again the that idea of them. They would have advocated for Wendelin to stand up to Preston. So again, that idea of discernment and your friends, listening to your friends, right? When Gromit rolls his eyes or looks at him and he's like, don't do that, Wallace should listen to him. He's proven himself to be smarter. And so you can have that idea of your friendship and the discernment that your friends have, and the ways then that your friends can kind of intercede in a situation to help you recognize the path that you should be on, recognize who you should be hanging out with, because then they don't draw you down that dark path, or they don't somehow ensnare you in that dark path, or they give you the encouragement and the strength to stand up and say, I will do this no more. And then you see at the end where even when Sean first showed up, he was kind of eating his way through everything. It seems much more, it seems a little more controlled, a little more controlled at the end. Like there's a more status quo to even Sean, Gromit, and Wallace's relationships at the end, where they've worked together, they've done these things, and now they're going to live together in more harmony. So even that's very sweet. Although he doesn't save Wendelin for himself. She's not, while he was smitten with her, she's not actually the woman that he's going to be with.
That's
for
true.
A variety of reasons, but it's still honorable that he was able to save her, but not save her for himself, just save her so that she is now in a better place.
Well, if you don't like Wensleydale,
I mean, if you're lactose intolerant, you and Wallace, that's never going to work. It's just never going to work.
If you're lactose intolerant, you cannot inherit Wallace's kingdom.
Nope.
Oh man. Well, but they weren't destined to have a relationship, obviously. But I did like that one scene too. Like something else we see when we think about sin sometimes, or when we think about even coming to Christ, or the one who would love us, right? Like that's like sometimes like she tries to ward him off because she doesn't think she doesn't think she's worthy of his affection. She doesn't think that she's like, I'll just bring you down. Like I'm tainted, I'm compromised. I just go away. And some people do feel that sense of why would you? I'm not even worthy of, like, which in one sense is true. We have God's unmerited favor, but when he comes to us, like, it's like no, just go away. Like I'm not even worth saving. Like that. We're so the response like that's a sad place to see somebody in, where you can't respond to. You can't respond to that love that's being offered, and it's like no. When God offers His love, that we are absolutely able to step into that relationship. Like that's we don't shut the door because we think we're unworthy. We actually embrace Him because we need to be saved, and which she needs to be saved. She needs to be pulled out of the relationship with Preston, not just I'm stuck. There's no way out. No, there is. There's Wallace and Gromit and Sean.
Well, and I think you see, for a short somewhat slight movie, there are actually some interesting things you can pull out of it, because you're right. She's living in the shame of her sin in the beginning and is trying to drive him away. But then there's this moment when she actually becomes convicted by her sin. So rather than wallowing in the shame of her sin, she becomes convicted by it. And she says, I am going to do this no more.
Yeah.
And she actually repents of it. And she says, I won't do this. And at that point, that's when her friends then come and truly, fully rescue her, because the one that has dragged her into that sin is then fully against her. Like his demeanor and his true nature is utterly revealed, that if she thwarts him, he will not help her. So again, that thing that you think is helping you, that sin that you think is providing something for you that you need, money or self-esteem or comfort, whatever that sin is providing to you, the second you actually deny it, you will discover that sin will turn on you in that sense. And in this case, it is a robot dog that turns into the Terminator and turns on you. But it's a beautiful picture of the fact that sin was leading you to death. Yeah. Legitimately, in this case, giant metal chompers of death. But then her friends rescue her and pull her out. And so, it's actually kind of a beautiful picture and metaphor that you can use for those things, of how she was ensnared and how she gets encouraged to stand up, edified to stand up and repent of her behavior, and then is pulled into a much better existence. And her sin is, quote unquote, put to death. He now has, he's a much better dog. Afterwards, the sin nature in Preston is put to death, and it no longer rules over her. It's back, like you were saying, the relationship of dog and master was flipped. And what happens then is it gets flipped back to what it should be. Yeah. He is, and again, now with the metaphor, is not that your sin is this comforting thing that's with you. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that your sin becomes this comforting thing that you can keep and play with as a pet. No.
I think where you could go with that, like in one sense, Preston, I mean, he's a robot dog. He represents the things of the world,
sure,
which aren't inherently bad. So like, okay, she was being ruled by the things the things in the world that should have been in a proper place in her life, but not supreme.
Correct.
Right? In a sense, he'd become her god, her idol, like was sort of ruling over her. And at the end, it's that thing didn't have to be taken out of her life. It's been redeemed, and now it's in a proper subservient place in her life, which is a lot of our passions.
Yes.
Even that's why we do popcorn theology, right? Movies could be an idol.
Absolutely.
And, like we could lose ourselves in these narratives that could be more important than a walk with God. But they have their right place. A lot of them can be redeemed. They need to be in the right position in our life, and not rule. They don't rule over us. So that maybe Preston Best fits the things of the world.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And a nice, again, just that nice little sort of visual metaphor. Him as the Terminator coming to try and destroy you, or him in his proper place where he's bringing you the paper and being the comfort that he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Or the partner, the friendship that he's supposed to provide, rather than ruling over her.
So maybe we can actually say that a grand day out maybe was diluted, but by the time you get to a close shave, I'd say a close shave is carbonated. Like that's definitely got the themes you can best play with.
Yes.
So if you sit down and watch all three together, as a family or with some folks who talk about these kind, you can have these kind of conversations. You at least have the third one to land the plane, I guess we should say. Maybe
Gromit lands a plane great.
Again with the miraculous Gromit, by the way.
Miraculous Gromit. Gromit's the best.
He can fly through. It can fly it through brick. He can fly it through.
And he has this little porridge gun. Pop, 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 pop. Like, so great.
Oh.
And the sheep that do the like.
Oh yeah. No, the sheep kind of manifest miraculous powers as well, or
yes.
at least some of the cheerleading powers.
Definite cheerleading powers. Yes.
Different formations.
Sorry, getting a little excited now.
Yeah.
I do adore these shorts, and it's fun to be able to pull a little more depth out of them than just saying that they're comfort food and they're sort of this nostalgia. That there is some underlying truth in them. There is some stuff you can actually talk about wrapped in this beautiful, clever, sweet, engaging tale. And for families and stuff, this is a great place to kind of start. They're engaging, they're fun, they're clever, and you can pull some stuff out of them to talk about. So this is honestly a great place to start warming up that idea of not watching something mindlessly, not just letting it.
Even the phrase you were talking about, comfort food, right? There's comfort in contentment. There's comfort in knowing that you have a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Yes.
And there's comfort in knowing that we have a rescue. Right?
Miraculous.
So we have a miraculous rescue and a miraculous rescuer. So so I'd say it is comfort food, even with the depth, like the part of the depth, or maybe part of the reason people don't think about why it comforts. Maybe they just don't think about it, which is, of course, why we do popcorn theology. So I'm glad you got to fulfill a little. I'm glad the Patreons, our patron saints, fulfilled your dream. And we're able to sort of set that up for you to enjoy this episode. I know I've enjoyed the episode, and so has Wallace, and so has Gromit. So then this kind of wraps up Comedy Month. There we go. So we will be heading into all new territory. I believe next week, our episode, we'll be looking at Furiosa. So we'll be heading a little bit out of the family-friendly territory and into something a little heavier and probably a little headier. But until next time, keep engaging movies from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.